So there were many footballers not able to play, not being able to physically participate in the sport anymore. My good friend also mentioned projects. We would have planned several projects over the years to ensure that football could continue to grow and develop. We were not able to realize some of those projects because of the impact of COVID. One project in particular would have been having a turf field implemented since in 2020. We were not able to move forward with that project because we do not have the professional resources on island to carry on the geotechnical surveys. Again, that was impacted by COVID because the professionals from overseas could not come in and carry out the necessary tests. Additionally, there would have been the financial strain. I know that many of the clubs don't raise revenue, but there would have been several fundraisers, and I see some footballers in the room. We could not go to businesses and ask for the general support as we used to. So all of the football teams in Anguilla, not only the Football Association, they got quite creative. And of course, in the long run, the Anguilla Football Association would have helped, supported some of their members. So I heard Mr. Collins mention $1.5 billion by FIFA. There was FIFA COVID relief plan. So FIFA from the war chest would have invested $1.5 billion, shared among all 211 members. So what that meant is that Anguilla, as a member association of FIFA, would have received $1.5 million as part of the COVID relief package. Now, that is why you might hear everyone saying that football have all the money. So part of our obligation, $0.5 million would have had to be put aside for women's football, women's development. So even though we receive funds, there would have been some regulations to ensure that we abide and we comply with the regulations set by FIFA. So although there might be $1.5 million, it don't necessarily mean we could just have the money spent all over the place. There are regulations in place that the Football Association must ensure that we follow and that we report. A lot of it include regulations and monitoring that we are in compliance before we can spend all of those funds. So part of the ways that our teams and our members would have benefited from the funds, we would have provided financial support to our member association to ensure that even in the event of COVID, they could continue with their agenda in terms of capacity building, social growth, community development. So each club of the Football Association would have received some financial assistance from the Anguilla Football Association. We also would have implemented what we call a voucher program, that our members who are going through the difficult times and all of the hardship, that they were able to continue. Because when we returned to football, we wanted to ensure that our members are able and that they could also continue to participate in football. We would have invested in infrastructure projects to ensure that we're not only thinking about football, but we're going to include all the other sports as we develop critical infrastructure, not only for football, but for the other community areas. Coaches, I heard Mr. Duncan mention that earlier. So even though football might have received funding, as Mr. Winston alluded to, you can see that the funding is being put to use. Currently, we have a senior men's coach on island, a youth development coach for boys, and a youth development officer for women, and also a strength and conditioning coach, which we will gladly try to share in the coming months, maybe at a small fee though. We also would have invested heavily in preparation for competitions. In 2020, the competitions were canceled, but in 2021, we would have been back to the full competitions calendar. So all our teams are currently very active in Anguilla. Our U20, our U17, our U15, our U13, and of course, if you've been looking around, you have seen that we are very active in also in the grassroots program. So I'll continue to touch on all of the spending and the funding. because the return, what we call the return to football, has been quite different. So even though we come back to the game, there would have been a lot of protocols, a lot of testing in order to compete. Recently, we've participated in 2 World Cup qualifiers, one in Miami versus the Dominican Republic, and a second game in Santo Domingo versus Barbados. Now, it is my observation that FIFA realized that at some point you'll have to return to football, and the $1.5 million will come in quite handy. I can tell you it is quite expensive. I've heard the minister mention it. To go to a 30-man squad on flight, accommodation, and testing, the protocols are quite extreme. They require testing 7 days before you go, 3 days before departure, 48 hours before the game day test. Now, these are not free, right? So they all come back to, that's just our senior men's national team would have to go and endure all of the testing and all of the financial obligations. Later this year, we'll also have our women team that will attend. They'll also have to go through all the testing and all of the travel accommodation fees, all of the testing. We'll have all our youth teams that are activated. They will be attending tournaments in CFU and in CONCACAF tournaments. Again, I can see where the $1.5 million will be going pretty soon. Okay? And now that our team is back on island, they all have to go through the normal health protocol set by the island, 14 days quarantine. So you can imagine we have a full team of 30 persons in quarantine for 14 days. All have to be supported by the Football Association. And of course, many of the players and coaches have full-time jobs. The Football Association also decided that we'll put a stipend program in place during the period in quarantine, so they're not out of funds from the regular job. So to sum it up, we won't look at it as only we've received funds from FIFA, but I think FIFA was quite generous to ensure that we are well positioned to continue to play football and to continue to develop. The costs are quite extreme, but COVID-19 is no easy joke. So therefore, my assessment on COVID-19 is that we'll give them a red card.
Thank you very much, Mr. Connor, for your poetic use of the red card. We know that some plays are very egregious, so we have to send that player off the field. Now we've reached to the stage where I can see a lot of you are eager for the questioning phase. You can ask any member of the panel. Hopefully, the sports director is still available, but you can ask a question of any member of the panel. Don't allow the heavy sound of silence to stop you from asking your question. So while we wait, I'll just make a few statements so that we could get the brain cells functioning here. And this is a slight tangent to what has been said today. Sport is a vehicle. And at times, vehicles will endure a rough road, or it may even have an accident, intentionally or unintentionally. But you would fix that vehicle and you get back in the car and you move ahead. So don't allow COVID or any other natural disaster to stop you, because as was said, this too shall pass. We had polio, we had the Spanish flu, we had HIV, we had, well, Ebola was on a smaller scale. But we've had epidemics. In a couple instances we would have had a pandemic or two, though not like this, but we've had it. So it's a matter of reorganizing and moving forward. Now, with that said, I now turn the floor over to the students who are bursting with questions for members of the panel.
So Duncan, while the students are getting themselves ready, can you hear me?
Good afternoon again. I know COVID struck down hard on all the sporting bodies, but this is just a question to gain some insight. To anyone who feels they could answer the question. My question is, what plans are in preparation to improve the level of sport in Anguilla? So like, what's next?
Well, I guess I'll start so that the mic is closer to me. Well, like I said earlier in my presentation, we've been coordinating with FIVB, which is the governing body for volleyball. And we are in plans currently for them to send us a coach in June for 3 months to work on our beach volleyball. That's one thing that's going to be happening for sure this year. We are also negotiating a coaches training session where our local coaches could be certified. We have level 1, level 2, and level 3. So we're doing level 1 first, get some of our youngsters, some of our coaches level 1 certified, and then get some of our coaches who already have level 1 to get the level 2 certification. So we are working on improving our coaching aspect of the sport. And we're also working on getting some assistance in improving our technical skills in the sport by them sending us a coach for the 3 months starting in June.
If I may add to that, we also have coaches on island because we think it's important that we bring in some resources from overseas to work with our local coaches for further development. Also, more facilities. The more facilities we have, we'll give the opportunity to more persons to be involved and grow the sport some more on the island for more development.
If I can answer more broadly, are you hearing me? Are you hearing me? Right. So I was saying, if I can answer a little more broadly, I think each of the associations have been trying to put things in place to really expand and volleyball.
And the sports director to get the ALHCS organized. Just want to try and buy some time here. Like I said, you know, development of our coaches is an ongoing process. We've had coaches coming before in 2000, I think it was 2018, No, it was 2018, yes. We had a coach that was here for 3 months who worked with a lot of our youngsters. And some of those youngsters are still playing the sport up to today. And prior to that, we've had coaches coming on a regular basis for a 3-month stint to work with our youngsters in teaching the sport of volleyball. And as I say, it's an ongoing process. It's something we have to keep continue doing. That's the only way really for us to grow and get better, is to have our knowledge base increase, and we are working very hard to try and do that. Okay, Mr. Collins, you could try talking now. We're waiting for you.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right, awesome. I was saying, thanks for your input, Jason. I think all associations have been trying to put things in place to really advance each individual sport. Some have been doing a better job than others. In Anguilla, we have a couple of situations. We have some national sporting associations who themselves are restructuring at this time, who are really trying to get volunteers in, as was said before, by Minister Merrick that being an administrator in a sport association is a very thankless job. And apparently only few people with broad backs like Lorna and Gordon and Jason and others are willing to step up to the plate. Some associations are actually struggling to find volunteers. So the Department of Sport is currently in the process of working with several associations to help them re-establish themselves and strengthen. In other associations, what we're looking to do is work with them to develop the coaching capacity, as Jason just spoke to, the fact that volleyball is doing that. And some other sports are looking at trying to enhance their coaching capacity. Some sports are trying at this time also to create avenues for scholarships. We have Mr. Duncan in the room, who I know has worked tirelessly with athletes to access scholarships, and there are others as well. And then there is the whole issue of player development that we have to work on. So there are several aspects of sport that we continue to work on. As Jason said, it is a process. We have not gotten close to where we need to be as yet, but I think right now we have several people who have committed themselves to try to move Anguilla to the place that we should be at. While we wait on the next question, I just want to say something in regards to what Mr. Connor presented. Having traveled with the Anguilla national team on a 12, if you can imagine, on a 12-day tour, we were tested 6 times. So from an economic standpoint, you can also imagine that has probably, I don't know the figures, Mr. Connor, but I suspect it would have doubled the cost of a normal tour. So it really speaks to how associations will have to prepare moving forward once they have to participate in international and regional competitions.
Question to you, Mr. Jason Labor. My question is, I've heard you mention volleyball, beach volleyball numerous times. So do you think players enjoy beach volleyball more than on-court volleyball?
That's a true question. It's tough to say, to be quite honest. I love both versions of the sport. Beach volleyball is easier to play because it takes less persons. I really can't tell you, to be quite honest, if a person would enjoy beach over indoor. It's a really tough question.
Hello. Okay. My question is kind of about sports in general, so I think Andre and Merrick, they will be more suited to answer the question. But so we saw the footballers, they traveled, they went away, and they were kind of funded. They got a lot of help from FIFA, but other sports like cycling, basketball, volleyball, they have to be funded more by local. They have to get their revenue locally. So what measures or ideas have been brought to the forefront to help fund these other sports that don't get that large international help when it comes time for them to eventually travel away to regional and international sporting events? And I guess Mr. Andre will be able to answer this one. What about the fears? Because he went away with the football team, so the fear for COVID that people have in traveling, what can you say about that and how the experience actually was?
Okay, I can take the second part of your question and I'll leave the first part for the Honorable Minister to answer. In terms of the fear factor, it's an interesting thing that you asked that question because even in terms of the players who were selected making that decision to travel, there was concern. I mean, because I think what people don't know scares them. And of course, this whole COVID situation, there's still a lot that we don't know. There's a lot also of misinformation that is going around. So I can generally say from the team's perspective that there were some people with various concerns. Thankfully, those concerns didn't stop people from stepping up and representing Anguilla. Even when we would have been in the environments in the US as well as Santo Domingo in the US, For example, the venues that we would have trained on and competed on, they had very strict COVID restrictions that we had to adhere to. There were temperature checks. There were, we obviously, as mentioned before, we had to do tests before, etc. And I think also when we got to Santo Domingo, because we, I think, have the perception that the risk is higher there, our players were even more stringent in following the protocols. Thankfully, the entire team was able to return without anyone contracting the COVID-19, which is a big thing for the team, because it shows that everyone was committed not only to play football, but to look after their health as well. So from that perspective, yes, there were fears, but thankfully the fears were more significant than the willingness to represent Anguilla.
I'll touch on
The part on funding.
before I get to the funding part. Another thing in terms of the overseas travel that's important, it's out there, the vaccine. I know there's a lot of for and against, but one of the new norms is going to be, if you're going to be traveling, if you're going to be taking part in overseas activities, the vaccine will be a must. So that's also something that have to be taken in consideration going forward as an athlete. And if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Connor, all the persons who traveled with the national team had their first shot before traveling.
Yes, the majority of the players.
Yeah, so it's going to be the new norm to take your jab. In terms of funding for the sporting bodies that don't have Gordon's bank book, as Mr. Collins like to remind me, sports have the second smallest budget in the ministry, and it is a concern, and that has to do with keeping the fields and the various facilities up to date, and there are also other things that the sports department have to put on. They have to take care of their administration duties, and that's with a, like I like to say, the second smallest budget in sports. That's why we do a lot of working with the various associations in terms of how they can improve their operations. I mentioned earlier in my presentation that being a volunteer in one of these sporting bodies is an entire full-time job, because just the fundraising aspect of alone, and usually the only time you can raise funds is when you put on your activity. So example, if you're in cycling, your biggest chance of raising funds is when you put on a cycling race. So you depend on the athletes, and you depend on the kind sponsors, and again, we all go to the same sponsors over and over, and some of them are exhausted. Some persons come up with creative ways. During this recent pandemic, I've eaten a lot of breakfasts, and I've been invited to a lot of walks, because teams are realizing we have to look outside of the box and try to raise our funds to support the various activities. No, that's just a small drop in a bucket. If you're traveling with a group, a team, it can easily run you $10,000 US, and that's just for flights. I'm part of a basketball team, and we took part in some small trips, one to St. Martin and one to Statia. We raised the funds entirely on our own. I mean, it's a lot of car washes, a lot of cake sales. But that's just to say, if you're going to be looking to do these things, sometimes we have to call on the athletes to do their part too. You have to sell some tickets, you have to wash some cars, because again, all of us don't have that big bank book. Yes, the government will at some point in time try to get us to the point where we can lend a lot more support to athletes and to associations, especially in terms of traveling. But for the immediate future, we're going to have to ask for a lot of help. And that's what it is too, a true partnership. We will try to do our part as much as possible, and we will request athletes and other stakeholders to do their part.
I just want to add something to your question in terms of, it's one of the most frustrating things in terms of being involved in sports, because I don't think it's just Anguilla alone, but in the Caribbean on a whole, I don't think we've made the connection how sports can benefit individuals and benefit the island. There's abroad, you can get a lot of scholarships to go to school, and then, as I think it was Gordon said, what the football does is they pay it back. So we have, well, Miss Harrigan, who's doing well right now, and I remember when she started on the volleyball court, on the Valley court, she was the layup. The layup, I was pleasantly surprised to see how she developed. Then we were just talking with Dr. Harrigan in terms of the other player, what's the other one? Tim Duncan, who is also Anguillan. But it's just to get the recognition and also to realize that there's different avenues to be successful. And my good friend Merrick, I'm gonna say, government needs to put more money into sports to give our athletes a fair opportunity. Anguilla has a lot of talent. I lived in Canada for a number of years, and I'll say of all the players, one of the best players that I've ever seen is Javier Brooks, also known as Special. One of the best basketball players, and not only does he play the sport well, he's an excellent coach. He can read a game, and he can take a mediocre team and allow them to beat or nearly beat a top team, and have the coach come from the bench and get very upset because he is that good. Unfortunately, now he's one of the best defensemen for Anguilla, for football. But I just say that to say that we just need to put more money into the sports to develop our youth, to give them that opportunity to advance. Because that is what we're doing now with the basketball. We're actually running a referee clinic, so we have some youth that came out. But sports give you so many opportunities, whether coaching, reffing, physiotherapists, so many different avenues, and we need to focus on it. And that's what I hope will happen.
Well, I'm not going to belabor the point, because what I really wanted to say that unless we get to the point where we begin, and not just those of us involved in sports, but government as well, unless we begin to think outside of the box and do things differently, and unless government recognizes that sports and the development of our young people through sports is as important as academics, until we get to that stage, there's going to be a limit as to what we can achieve. You can't get anywhere by giving an association $20,000, $25,000 EC dollars a year, when that can't even take one team to a competition overseas, moreover, do anything on a local basis. So I am sure that as students, you probably would want to know what is the allocation, forget about COVID, what is the allocation of the government's budget to sports? Think about it. And when you know what the allocation of the government's budget is for sports, you will know that government does not take sports seriously. And I think that the challenge is for you young people to demand rightfully what should happen. And again, I'm saying, forget that I know that we're in a COVID environment right now. I know that right now is not the time, but you still have to think about it. And until we get governments to see sports as how they should see it, we're gonna have a hard time, because I can tell you for the number of years I've been involved in track and field, that sponsorship funds have dried up, everybody's raising money, and there's a limit as to what you can do.
Thank you very much for inviting me, first of all. I'm pleased to be here. Lorna is so used to my my talk about fundraising. I mean, we go back a long way, by the way. Excellent netball player, I know, at UVI. Tell me about it. Thinking outside the box. That's what like what she said. Thinking outside the box. We have heard today that we don't have the money. Funds are dried up. You know, the businesses don't have the money. We don't have the money. Nobody has money. So we got to begin to think outside of the box. And I'm not sure what I'm going to say is really outside the box. It's really in the box. But we just have to see it. Okay? I thought we had a nice discussion, Lorna and myself, and I talked to Ms. Riley as well about Tim Duncan and Ms. Herbert Harrigan Herbert. Okay? We all know, right? Right. We know Tim Duncan. Duncan was born in St. Thomas or St. Croix. His parents are from Anguilla. That young lady who's in the Seattle, is Seattle she's in right now? Seattle basketball. She's in Seattle, the Seattle basketball team, women basketball team. She grew up in Anguilla. She played basketball in Anguilla. You understand what I'm saying? So we have to use these people. We have to recognize them. No. You understand what I'm saying? No. We don't have to wait. Tim Duncan is going to be inducted in the National Basketball Hall of Fame. What have we done for him? Have we called him? Have we sent him a letter saying congratulate? Maybe you have, I don't know. I'm just assuming that you haven't. Have we sent him a letter of congratulations? Do we have a basketball league in Anguilla named after Tim Duncan? Huh? A basketball court? Huh? Why don't we find ways to recognize these people? Ask them the permission, because you can't do it without the permission. But these guys give money to all over the place. I've known Tim Duncan to give money to Jamaica. You understand what I'm saying? Jamaica. So why can't we, as a sport organization, recognize these people, invite them to Anguilla, have a reception, have a dinner, have something to recognize these people. And believe it or not, in return, you may not get it today or tomorrow, but eventually if you send a letter out and say, listen, we'd like to name something after you, these guys will reciprocate. I can assure you that. Tim Duncan parents of Anguilla. He's not going to let them down. So we have to reach out to these people as an organization, begin with the government. Find a way to recognize these people. We have to find this young lady, Miss Herbert Harrigan. We need to invite her now. See, she's at a stage where now is the time to do that, because you don't want it to get well and people start to influence her about things in Anguilla or something. Let her name the women basketball league after her. The school league. You know? I call it intramural. We call it interscholastic. It's called interscholastic, right? Interscholastic. The interscholastic basketball league, women league. You don't have a women league, but you could still name the league after her. Name things after these people. Let them come home and throw up the first ball. Okay? And eventually, they get used to that. And they'll begin to support you, because that we begin to nurture. The money's going to come right away, but it's going to come eventually. It's going to come, I'm telling you. I preach this Duncan thing all the time, because I'm at the board of the college here, and I'm telling them about Duncan. Trust me. And if you don't want to do it, we're going to do it. But I think you have a better opportunity as a sport institution to try and get these people involved in your organization. Okay? Sponsor a Tim Duncan golf tournament. What he will do, he'll bring all his friends, all his basketball friends and colleagues, who will pay to come and play golf at Cousinards. And the proceeds from that golf tournament will benefit the organizations. You could have an endowment fund for sports here in Anguilla. An activity like what I just mentioned to you, the money will go into that endowment and then organized by the members here. Your sport will apply for money to go to an event, apply to the endowment for money. If the endowment has the funds, you'll get the money. But you need to have tournaments like a golf tournament, a tennis tournament, some kind of tournament for celebrities. And they will pay the money, believe it or not, to participate, and the proceeds will go into the endowment. You know, I've heard a lot about big basketball players and movie stars and so on coming to Anguilla. Sure, they come. How many of us are willing to, and most of these people, believe it or not, they have endowment funds. They have foundations. Many of them are part of foundations. If you know the foundation, if for example, LeBron James has a foundation, well, I will send a letter to LeBron James Foundation to ask for money, because I'm a nonprofit. And if he's been to Anguilla, believe it or not, he's going to recognize that right away. A little group in Anguilla is asking my foundation for money. Why not? And you just go down the list of all the celebrities who have been in Anguilla, who have foundations that support nonprofit. There are a whole lot of them. Ask your parents who work in hotels. Ask your parents who have been here. Listen, could you tell me who have been here? There's a movie star or a sports athlete or somebody. And then you inquire as to whether or not they have foundations. And if they have foundations, trust me, and you have an organization, you write a letter to that foundation and ask them if they support sports in your country. It could be basketball, it could be a choir, it could be any activity. Ask them. Could only say no. You see what I mean? I'm saying that we know the problem is money. I'm familiar with that, because I've been in sports for donkey years, trust me. I know Winston. I've been president of the Virginia University Sports Federation for 22 years. I knew when Winston came to China and to Korea with the Anguillian group, okay? And money is always a problem. Luckily for us in university sports, the International University Sports Federation paid for 3 people to come, a coach and 2 athletes. So you know there's some international federations that will give you some money, okay? So we benefited from that, but we had to raise a lot of our own money as well. I am saying that, and we did what I'm telling you. We had fundraising activities, we had a dinner, we recognized community people, and the proceeds from those things went to supporting our trips, because that's the most expensive part of the trip, you know, of the activity funding. So I'm saying to you, this is just my suggestion. I get emotionally involved in these things, believe it or not, because I have a passion for sports. I've been in sports all my life, and I've been in sports management for a long time. So I'm not here shooting the breeze or what have you. I'm telling you from my experience and what I feel we can do here in Anguilla, because we lack the funds. And it's not going to come now, like somebody said earlier. You know, the businesses are broke. Everybody's broke. So let us look outside of the box. Let us look at these people who may be able to help us. And this is a pandemic time, let's look to those people who have visited Anguilla, who have money, who we believe, or at least I believe, will be able to help us in this time, in this pandemic time, when we need it most. So I would suggest to the government officials, or suggest to the organizers here, that we need to get involved in thinking outside the box. We need to write letters to those dignitaries, those officials, those sports celebrities who have been here, inquire as to whether or not they have foundations that would accept letters of invitation to come. Let's recognize Duncan and Miss Harrigan, Herbert Harrigan, believe it. She's going to, I believe if we get her now, we'll be able to impact have her impact what we're doing here in Anguilla in basketball, and not only basketball, because it's all sports in general. The same for Tim Duncan as well. You know, he's never been here. We don't know him. You can't imagine he's never been here. This guy has to come to the place of his parents' birth. Anyway, so much for that. Thank you.
So now I'm wearing the other hat. I'll be speaking as a member of the floor. We're going to stay outside of the box. And I'm going to speak specifically to two sports, track and field and football. For some of you Americans, soccer. We have to become a lot more proactive. And one such mechanism is to actually invite coaches here. Because a lot of the times, there are things which you or the regular layman is not going to pick up. But a seasoned professional can see glimpses of goodness, future talent. Secondly, and I think Dr. Harrigan did an excellent job. We got to use our past athletes. We have athletes, and I'm going to speak specifically to track and field and football. We have athletes, we've had athletes who are in university. They would have a good rapport with the coaches. Coaches are looking for athletes. That there is your bridge. No matter how much you, as the coach, speaks to the other coach, it's a lot more efficient and a lot more effective when the athletes talk to the coach, especially if that athlete is doing well. And that's a bridge to get your other players in. The funding issue, which is the fundamental problem, there are several ways around it. One such way, let us say you're having the finals or the semifinals for a football game, or you're having a big track meet. You can charge an entry fee, yes, but you can also think about a 50-50 raffle, 60-40, or 75-25, something along those lines raffle, where some of the proceeds will be going towards your scholarship fund. Because the reality is, a lot of athletes would get opportunities, but funding is going to be an issue. To parents, if you recognize your child has ability and you have the wherewithal, think of life insurance. There are some policies which have different time frames, and you can actually get cash returns from it, and that could be utilized for providing that funding that is so desperately needed. But then to the athletes, they must actually put themselves out. They must actually improve their quality. Because while you may put everything else in place, if the athlete is not pushing towards excellence, and I'm not talking about being good here, because a lot of the athletes get that in their mind, oh, I'm good here. You have to compare yourself to the competition, so to speak. Sports is an international business. Whereas some of us may think, oh, I won let us say, the shot put here in Anguilla by throwing this distance or that distance. You can go online and actually look at it and say, wow, okay, I need to improve my effort. Believe it or not, schools are looking for athletes. I'm not asking you, and Dr. Harrigan knows this. I am telling you. And I'm not telling you what I heard other persons saying. I'm telling you based on conversations I have with coaches on a regular basis. So the opportunity is there, but there are several things which needs to be put in place. One, the quality of the athlete has to improve. And you have to be a lot more strategic in terms of time management. Two, funding. Associations would have to become a little more creative. Your car raffle mightn't work right now because of times, but I'm certain a 50-50 raffle, that could be something that we could look at. And 3, parents, you got to help out. Well, not you who are here, but parents in general. A lot of the times, the onus is left on the coach to do this and do that and do that. It's also your responsibility. It is your offspring that, at the end of the day, gets the scholarship, gets the contract. Because believe it or not, some athletes are going to reach to the pinnacle of the sport, and they're going to forget about how they got there. So parents, your job is to also inculcate within the athlete, within your child, the responsibility of supporting the ladder that brought you up. Because if you support that ladder, then there's a possibility for others to have that opportunity. Thank you. So let me switch hats again. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I know I come in late, but excuse me. Well, 2 questions. My first one is how far is Anguilla from having salaries for athletes? I know that you guys have salaries, but I grew up to not ask adults their salaries because it's disrespect. Yeah, that's the first question. The second question is, in terms of helping resources, can Anguilla look out to regional countries and international countries for help and resources? Or is that decided by the government and the international bodies for acceptance?
Well, I think the question that you are most interested in is the first one, right? So let me say this. As far as track and field is concerned, if you are an athlete that has the potential to get a scholarship, if you're at that level, you have to be very careful about accepting money, because you can be, in terms of getting a scholarship to go to university, if you're accepting money, prize money or money just like that, you can be disqualified from being able to get a scholarship to go to school. Now, athletes can be assisted financially by helping them with, let's say, gear, like training gear and that kind of thing, or paying for the airfare and so on. But the actual giving of a salary, I can't speak for the other sports, but I know that if you are just a regular athlete out there and you're not hoping to go any further by way of a university or college education, and if there is money to pay you, fine. But I can tell you that, again, track and field, we wish we had money to even give our coaches a stipend. Whatever we do is free of cost. Whatever we do. As a matter of fact, very often we have to put our hands in our pockets to help with the funding for athletes. Let me put it to you another way. I was explaining, for instance, how much money we get from, let's say, government through the sports department. Not much. Outside of that, if we do our annual report on time and we fulfill our obligations with World Athletics, we get an annual grant of $15,000 US. Now that is the biggest sum of money that we get in a year for anything. I was explaining about the $20,000 US grant that we have applied for. There's no guarantee that we will get it, but we've applied for it. Of course, it's a proposal, so to be specific. We are trying to get some funding to look at grassroots programs, yeah? But we have no money. It's as simple as that. We have no money. In reaching out to bodies overseas, well, outside of our parent body, World Athletics, There's also our regional body, NACAC. NACAC has no money. NACAC it's our area. The World Athletics is divided, I think, into about 5 areas. We are part of North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. They have no money. We would like to approach times when we could even give athletes a stipend. I know when athletes travel to competitions, I mean, our track and field athletes, other federations, they are able to give their athletes a stipend. We're not in that position. You see the differences, for instance, take Barbados. On an annual basis, when they prepare their budget, they simply present their budget to government, and government funds it in total. We don't have that luxury. That doesn't happen here. So that is the reality of where we are. We have to do fundraising like anybody else, and we are often, more often than not, although we will send our athletes to whatever competitions are overseas, you will have to ask Perry to help you to explain how we fund our trips overseas. He's vice president of our association. I don't know if anybody wants to answer. Since I don't want to hog it, somebody else can answer the other question. I don't know if that satisfies you as far as track and field is concerned.
Yeah. I think the question was in terms of how close is Anguilla to being able to pay athletes. Am I right with, was that the question?
Yes.
Notwithstanding what Lorna has shared, I think the reality is, again, we have to look at Anguilla as a situation of economy of scale. Anguilla is not in a position where each of these sports can sustain its own existence. And it's only when that can happen that you can generate income to be able to pay your participants. So unless we start to approach the level where some of our leagues on the island are semi-professional, right, getting ready to move to professional, it will be difficult to say that we can pay athletes in Anguilla. However, that notwithstanding that, several athletes can make a living from Anguilla if they excel in their sport, because there's opportunity to compete at the highest level around the world in the different sports, to find yourself, if it's as a footballer, to play foreign for a club. If you're a volleyball player, there's an international circuit as well. So there are opportunities for athletes to find a living and to make a living through sport on a global scale. But to say how far we are locally from being able to pay athletes, I personally think we are a little ways away from that. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to be put in place. And the reality is, if with our size, it's very difficult to be able to have leagues and tournaments and events where we can sustainably pay people to participate. But that's just my take on it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the various comments. It is now approximately 4:45, and I recognize this is a very interesting topic. We are getting to issues at heart, but as the saying goes, all good things unfortunately must come to an end. So we will now ask we'll now have Ms. Jennifer Connor present the certificates. Ms. Connor and her assistant.
Good afternoon. As a sign of our appreciation to you for taking time out and offering your presentations, we wish to offer you this certificate of appreciation. Honorable Mr. Merrick Richardson. Miss Pamela Riley. Mistress Lana Kentish Rogers. Mr. Gordon Connor. Mr. Jason Loybord. And last but by no means least, Mr. Winston Duncan. Mr. Andre Collins will receive his certificate at his arrival.
Thank you very much, Ms. Connor. We'll now ask Mr. Carlos Richardson to come and give the vote of thanks. Mr. Carlos.
Good afternoon. I would like to express thanks to God for making this sport conference successful today and for making sure that everything was safely prepared and done. I extend sincerest gratitude to our sponsors who played a big role in making sure that this sports conference was successful. So therefore, thanks to Tropical Distributors, English Rose, Titanium Audio and Visual, Island Wines and Spirit, and High Tech Sign and Designs. Firstly, to Kimani Haj for his welcome remarks, to Joanne Singh for invoking God's presence over this afternoon proceedings. Thanks also to Ronica and her group, as well as Jaheem Christie for the national song and school song. Thanks to Tejnik Richardson for introducing the facilitator. To Mr. Winston Duncan, thank you for so ably facilitating the flow of the conference. We extend a heartfelt thank you to our speakers, to Honorable Merrick Richardson, to Mr. Andre Collins, Ms. Pamela Riley, Mr. Jason Leibert, Ms. Lana Kentish Rogers, and lastly, Mr. Gordon Connor, for sharing their views and knowledge about the impacts of COVID-19 on the economic growth of sport bodies in Anguilla. To Jennifer Connor, your assistance in presentation of certificates will not go unnoticed, and so we thank you. To you, the audience, who came and support us here today. To the parents and guardians for making an effort to come out and helping us execute this conference. We thank you for your presence. To our teacher, Ms. Tricia Bennett, for guiding us throughout this process. Finally, if there's anyone who knows they contributed in some way and did not hear their name, please know that we are grateful for whatever service you rendered. Again, on behalf of the Albania Lake Hodge Comprehensive School, Physical Education and Sport, Unit 2, students, thank you all.
Good afternoon once again. Thank you very much for your presence. Just to let you know, we have some snacks outside, so please don't rush off. Do get something to eat. Alrighty. Ciao.